In Qing Dynasty Manchuria, chopping down a tree could get you executed. The emperor claimed every forest for himself. The problem? Winter temperatures hit -40 degrees, and without wood, fire was nearly impossible. So how did millions of ordinary farmers survive 5 months of lethal cold, using nothing but agricultural garbage? This is the story of 7 interlocking survival systems, engineered by people who had no electricity, no coal supply chains, and no permission to cut a single branch. Every one of those systems was built from materials that the imperial court considered worthless: crop stalks, animal blood, and raw dirt. The sealed frontier. To understand what these villagers achieved, you first need to understand the trap they were locked inside. In the mid-17th century, the Manchu rulers of the Qing Dynasty established the Feng-Jin policy, a strict seal and prohibit mandate over their ancestral homeland. The reason was money. Manchuria was the global epicenter for sable furs and wild ginseng, 2 of the most valuable commodities on the Silk Road. The emperor wanted total monopoly. To enforce it, they built something extraordinary: the Willow Palisade. Stretching over 1,000 miles across the northeast, longer than the distance from New York to Miami, this was not a wall of stone. It was a massive network of parallel earthen berms, divided by deep trenches and topped with thousands upon thousands of living willow trees, their branches lashed together with rope to form an impenetrable biological fence. 21 heavily guarded customs gates controlled every entry and exit. Let that sink in. A living wall, longer than most countries, grown from the earth itself and maintained for over 2 centuries. Inside this sealed zone, designated as prohibited mountains, gathering firewood was a criminal offense. The emperor's palace claimed the best timber. The military took the charcoal. For an ordinary family, every splinter of wood was a luxury they could not afford to burn. They were left with the only resource nobody wanted: the stalks of sorghum, millet, and corn, alongside dried animal dung. There was one massive physical problem with this fuel. If you throw a pile of dried sorghum stalks into a standard fireplace, it flash burns, incredibly hot for about 60 seconds, and then it is nothing but ash, useless for heating a home through a 10-hour Manchurian night. These villagers did not try to make bad fuel behave like good fuel. They completely re-engineered the concept of heating. The thermal battery. While medieval European lords burned literal tons of old-growth oak in massive stone fireplaces, sending roughly 80% of their heat straight up the chimney, the villagers of northern China grasped a principle we have spent the last century forgetting. You do not heat a house, you heat a human. The kang is a raised masonry platform built of stone or brick, covered in a thick layer of clay. It takes up a large portion of the living space. It is not just a bed, it is a horizontal chimney. Inside the kang runs a serpentine maze of flue channels. When the family cooks their evening meal on the kitchen stove, the hot smoke and exhaust gases do not escape into the sky. Instead, they are forced horizontally through this labyrinth beneath the sleeping platform. As the smoke travels slowly through the tunnels, the high-mass brick and clay absorb the heat through conduction. By the time the exhaust finally reaches the outside chimney, most of its thermal energy has been captured. Here is what that looks like in practice. At dusk, a farmer feeds a bundle of dry sorghum stalks into the stove. The flames roar. 20 minutes later, the fire is completely dead. But the thermal mass of the kang has acted like a giant battery. It soaked up all that flash heat and will now slowly radiate it upward for the next 10 to 15 hours. At midnight, the air in the room drops below freezing. The family sleeps comfortably on a platform, radiating steady, gentle warmth. They survived the night without burning another stalk of grass. That solved the nights. The days presented a different threat entirely, because a warm bed means nothing if the Siberian wind walks straight through your walls. the blood-bound bioconcrete. Plain mud walls are full of microscopic pores. In summer, that is fine. In a Manchurian winter, moisture seeps into those pores, freezes and expands. This freeze-thaw cycle cracks the walls open from the inside. By midwinter, a standard earthen wall becomes a sieve and the wind cuts right through. The villagers needed a chemical sealant. They had no petroleum products, no synthetic polymers, no industrial adhesives. What they did have was livestock, and after the autumn slaughter, they had buckets of porcine and ox blood. They treated that blood as a construction chemical. They mixed it with lime water and raw mud. When the high alkalinity of the lime met the proteins in the blood, a biochemical reaction occurred. The albumin proteins cross-linked with the calcium ions, creating a dense hydrogel. As the mixture cured in the air, it formed microscopic calcium carbonate crystals distributed in layered, ladder-like structures. This was ancient bioconcrete. Families would brush this thick, dark mixture over their most weather-exposed walls before the first freeze. When 60-kilometer-per-hour winds screamed across the plains in January, the homes stood firm. The blood mortar created a hydrophobic, water-repelling shell that sealed the mud wall tight. The compressive strength increase was so significant that structures built with this technique have been documented surviving severe seismic events in the region. Leveraging the enemy. A sealed mud house is a dark cave. 5 months of total darkness will break a human mind faster than the cold. So how do you let light inside when you do not have glass? The villagers used oiled paper windows. They took tough mulberry bark paper and soaked it in soybean or tung oil. The oil filled the microscopic gaps between the cellulose fibers, preventing light from scattering. The result was a translucent, waterproof membrane that filled the home with a soft amber glow. Here is the engineering detail that separates clever from genius. Every instinct tells you to protect a fragile sheet of paper by pasting it on the inside of the wooden window lattice, safe from the storm. These villagers did the exact opposite. They pasted the oiled paper on the outside of the frame. Why? Because they understood aerodynamics. When the winter gale hits the house, the force of the wind pushes the oiled paper flat against the wooden grid. The harder the wind blows, the tighter the seal becomes. Instead of fighting the storm, they turned it into a structural ally. The stronger the blizzard, the better the window performed. That solved light and insulation in a single stroke. It also created a terrifying invisible problem. The breathing roof. What happens when you put a fire inside a perfectly sealed, wind-proof box? You die. Burning crop stalks and dried dung produces carbon monoxide. Odorless, colorless, lethal. In a perfectly sealed room, a sleeping family would simply never wake up. The villagers had no mechanical ventilation and no carbon monoxide detectors. They solved this life-or-death physics problem through material selection alone. They constructed their roofs using a specific thickness of straw thatch, combined with layers of oiled paper. This created a semi-permeable membrane. The roof blocked the heavy winds, but allowed for a slow, passive gas exchange. Because warm air rises, the toxic smoke from the evening stove drifted upward, flat against the ceiling, and slowly filtered out through the micro gaps in the thatch. At the same time, fresh oxygen seeped inside. The fast-moving winter wind blowing over the roof created a low-pressure zone, what physicists call the Bernoulli principle, that naturally vacuumed stale air out without creating a freezing downdraft. Generations of trial and error taught them the exact razor-thin margin required. Pack the straw too tight, and the family suffocates. Pack it too loose, and the heat escapes, and they freeze. The margin between survival and death was measured in millimeters of thatch. Biological time capsules and geothermal vaults. Staying warm and breathing clean air means nothing if your body disintegrates from the inside. In a land where the ground is frozen solid and nothing grows from November to March, nutrition becomes the ultimate engineering problem. The villagers solved it with high-pressure lacto-fermentation. In late October, racing against the coming frost, families harvested massive quantities of Napa cabbage. They layered the leaves with coarse salt inside giant ceramic vats and pressed them down with stones so heavy it took 2 grown men to lift them. The massive weight crushed the oxygen out. The salt drew moisture to create a brine. In this oxygen-free, acidic environment, lactobacillus bacteria thrived. The bacteria did not just preserve the cabbage, it locked the vitamins in time. By January, when the world outside was a white, dead wasteland, the family opened the vat to find swan sai, sour, tangy cabbage packed with the exact nutrients their bodies needed. They also had to protect something even more valuable than their dinner: the seeds for next year's harvest. At the surface, Manchurian temperatures can swing 70 degrees between summer and winter. That swing will rot any grain, destroy any seed, and crack any storage jar. So the villagers looked down. They dug deep subsurface cellars called dihun directly beneath their homes. Just 3 meters below the frost line, the soil temperature stabilizes at a constant 4 to 8 degrees Celsius year-round. The planet itself acted as a zero-energy refrigerator. While a blizzard raged above ground, the underground was the warmest, safest place for 1,000 miles. The thermodynamics of the collective. A single human body in a large, freezing room loses heat faster than its metabolism can replace it. Sleeping alone on a kang would mean burning significantly more precious crop stalks just to survive the night. The kang was not built for one person. It was built for 10. The entire extended family, grandparents, parents, children, slept on the same platform. The youngest and the oldest were placed in the center, surrounded by the strongest, warmest adult bodies on the outer ring. This was a mathematical survival algorithm. By grouping together, the family reduced their collective heat loss by roughly 30%. The family became a single, multi-organism heat engine. Historical records from the Qing Dynasty often described these villages as passive during the deep winter months. From a thermodynamic perspective, that passivity was calculated. By minimizing physical exertion and staying together on the kang, they drastically reduced their metabolic rate, conserving the limited calories left after paying the emperor's grain taxes. It was a form of localized human hibernation, not laziness, but engineering at the level of biology. The blueprint beneath the snow. So picture that farmer again, standing on the frozen Manchurian plain. No timber, no coal, no permission to cut a single branch. He did not need any of it. Beneath his feet was a geothermal vault, keeping his seeds alive at a steady 4 degrees. On his walls, pig blood had hardened into bioconcrete that could withstand the worst the Siberian wind could throw. His windows sealed tighter with every gust. His roof breathed out poison while holding in warmth. His dinner was fermenting quietly in a ceramic vat, locking in the vitamins that would keep his family's bodies from falling apart. And at night, 10 people on a single heated platform turned their own bodies into the final piece of the survival engine. 7 systems, 0 electricity, built entirely from things an emperor considered worthless. Crop stalks, animal blood, raw dirt. And every single morning, that family woke up warm. I would love to hear your thoughts. Which of these 7 ancient survival systems do you think is the most ingenious? And do you think you could last a winter on a kang with your entire extended family? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden chapter of history, please leave a like, subscribe to Silk Road Annals, and ring the bell so you never miss our next journey across the ancient world. See you on the Silk Road.